Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Starfest Presents Ann Wheeler. My name is Michelle Steinhuisen. I am the Starfest director this year, and I wanted to thank everyone for joining us. We're sharing our amazing authors and stories from St. Albert Public Library, which sits on Treaty 6 territory, traditional lands of First Nations and Métis people. This is a virtual event, but we do want it to be an interactive event. So please put questions, comments in the chat. What you want to do is change your chat settings from hosts and panelists to say everyone, and then everyone will be able to see your questions and comments. And we'll be pausing a couple times during the program to answer questions. So if you've got those bye-bye blues questions, get them up there quickly. So Anne's book, grab it here, Taken by the Muse, is available at our local independent bookstores like Audrey's Books and Glass Bookshop. But if you do want to get a signed copy, Anne has it available through her website, where you can order a signed copy of Taken by the Muse, and we will put that link in the chat as well. So I am going to ask Anne to pop on screen here. Hello.
Hello.
I thought I'd get all the preliminaries out of the way. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is very exciting. Last night, we had Bye Bye Blues at the Arden. I think a lot of people appreciated being able to go out to do, to do an event. So, but I'm going to sing your praises first before I let you talk. Okay. So at the end of Starfest Festival, we ask the audience who they want to see at future festivals. We do that every year, and we're going to ask it at the end of this year. Anne Wheeler's name showed up multiple times on the list last year. So I was thrilled when she said yes. She was our first Starfest yes. And here's the part where I condense a multi-decade, multi-award-winning career into a few sentences. Born and raised on the prairies, Anne Wheeler grew up entertaining with her mother, a dynamite stride piano player, and exploring the open country north of Edmonton on her Appaloosa pony. She did tell me she used to ride her pony into St. Albert to get ice cream. I'd like to hear more about that. She graduated in mathematics at the U of A, became a computer programmer, and then dropped everything and traveled the world. She began her filmmaking career with the award-winning Edmonton film collective Film West, dedicated to making Indigenous films that addressed issues including the environment, Native rights, women's rights, and Western politics. After leaving the collective, Anne worked with the National Film Board, where she made her first feature film, A War Story, relating the devastating story of her father's time in a POW camp during World War II. Her place as one of Canada's foremost filmmakers was established with two more multi-award-winning features, Loyalties, a dramatic feature examining issues of sexual abuse and racism, and Bye Bye Blues, an appealing musical drama inspired by her mother's experience as a musician in a small dance band during the Second World War. Anne has also worked extensively as a director for episodic television, and her recent credits include The Romeo Section, Rain, Heartland, and Bond Girls. Anne continues to be one of Canada's most sought-after directors and is active in the film industry as a writer, teacher, and mentor. She has received several honorary doctorates, is the first woman to be given a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Directors Guild of Canada, and received the Order of Canada. And I just wanted to share, just going to bring something up and share this with, because I think this shows people, really. This is Anne Wheeler's IMDb page. IMDb is the International Movie Database. And I was looking at it earlier, and I'm going to make us all a bit seasick, because this is the list of Anne's credits on IMDb, which is pretty much everything she's worked on, and it just keeps going and going and going and going and going. I won't even take you all the way down to the bottom because it doesn't seem to stop. So that to me, you know, says everything. So, tonight we get to learn about Anne's life and journey through her memoir, Taken by the Muse, on the path to becoming a filmmaker. Anne is going to take us to south of Mombasa, where she went after calling off her wedding. I also want to hear about that. And was the beginning of the journey to discover her sense of purpose and passion. I'm going to let Anne take over now because I think we have a long road to travel. And I'd like to invite you once more, post your questions and your comments in the chat. Enjoy the evening. I'll leave it to you, Anne.
Great. Now, do I get to see all these wonderful people, or are they all hidden to me? I know you're there, but
they're
it's
here
huge.
in spirit.
They're here in spirit.
And
Okay.
and digital. Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyways, hello, everyone. I bet there's a lot of people that I know looking at me right now. And I wish I was there in a big room with you sharing this in person. I was so excited to get invited to this Writers Festival. I mean, of course, writing is a new career for me, prose. I've done a lot of screenwriting, but I've never written a book before. So it took a while. And it came upon me that I'd done a lot of films. In the 80s and 90s, I did a lot of films that I wrote and I directed, and those are sort of like my films that are like my children. Then it became harder and harder to do films that were personal films, that were things that you initiated. And I started getting hired by Canadians and Americans to do a lot of television. And it seemed, especially as a Westerner, particularly hard to get features off the ground. And so for the last number of years, I haven't done actually a feature for at least 10 years. And I have a lot of stories yet to tell. And at some point you have to say, well, I'm just not going to tell them all. I've made a good effort to tell as many as I can. But, people send me stories. I hear stories. I live stories. And I thought, I guess in the traditional sense, I'm a storyteller, and I didn't want these stories to be lost. And the only way I could think to save them was to write them in a book, and maybe somebody else will make a film about them or a play or something. But I think that as Canadians, this whole ownership of our stories is a bit threatened. If I write a script, the main audience is going to be American and British, and they're going to want to have some notable stars and locations and something that their audiences can relate to if I'm going to distribute there. And it's pretty hard to finance a film if you don't aim towards the bigger audiences. So there's a really, in all of the arts, I'm sure there's many people sitting in the audience nodding right now, in all of the arts, the market has really taken over and had an enormous effect on what you make, what you say, what you paint. And, but, books are still something that people hold in their hands and or find on their phones or whatever. But the word is between the storyteller and the reader, and that has been a wonderful discovery for me, I must say. It's become my passion. I write every day now. I'm on another book. I started a couple of books. Some of them I think, this is not the next one, and so. It's really exciting to have this welcome in a place that, of course, as Michelle said, I know from another lifetime when I had Appaloosa ponies at my aunt's farm just a few miles out of St. Albert, and we used to ride all over that countryside, which now probably I would hardly recognize because we used to swim in the river where the bridge goes over. So lots has changed. I've gotten old and bold, and I'm going to start by just reading a little bit from the introduction of the book. because I think it sort of sets the tone. It's 1986. I woke up in the middle of the night with a sense of urgency and a song that my mother often played ringing in my head. Don't send me rosies when it's shoesies that I need. Knowing sleep would be impossible, I pulled on my parka, stepped into my winter book, trudged across the backyard through the deep snow to my writing shack. The door was iced up, frozen shut, so I gave it a good strong yank to break it open. It had been weeks since I'd written anything. With 2 young sons to raise and a small film company to run, it had been hard to get beyond the practical tasks of each day. I needed these times of silence, of aloneness. I needed the mental space to be creative. Tonight, perhaps, the magic would spill out of me. I turned on my spanking new Columbia computer and opened up the file for Bye Bye Blues. It seemed like I had been grinding away for years on this epic screenplay, inspired by my mother's wartime years. I had already written at least 6 or 8 drafts, maybe more. I lost count. They were all so mediocre, just scratching the surface and revealing nothing of substance. There I was, sitting all over again at 2 a.m. in the morning, shivering in the dim light, staring at the computer screen as it flickered into life. Come on, baby. I know it's cold in here, but let's give this one last try. Suddenly the phone rang. What on earth? Who could that be? Thinking it had to be the wrong number, I answered with a curt hello, ready to cut the caller off quickly. There was a slight pause at the other end, then a smoky tone. Is this Ann Wheeler? I couldn't place the voice. It could be anyone. My name was right in the phone book. My number was no secret. At this hour, it had to be the wrong number or someone weird. Yes, it is, I said flatly, offering no encouragement. Who is this? I'm sorry, did I wake you up? Well, not exactly, no, but who are you? And it's an odd hour to be calling. It's Margaret Lawrence. Oh my God, I blurred. I didn't think I'd ever hear from you. Margaret Lawrence was my all-time favorite writer and a literary giant. She was a 3-time winner of the Governor General's Award. Anyone who had taken high school English had studied her work. 2 years ago, I had the privilege of adapting one of her short stories to film, To Set Our House in Order. It was a semi-autobiographical piece, and it was told in the first person by Vanessa McLeod, who, like Margaret, grew up in a small prairie town and eventually left to become a writer. I accepted the assignment to write and direct the film with trepidation. I mean, how could I live up to Margaret's genius and reputation, especially when I knew that the book was essentially about her? And this was a particularly difficult story to adapt. It traces the inner thoughts of Vanessa at the age of 10 when she and her family moved into her parental grandmother's home. Miserably, she'd witnessed how Ewan, her father, a doctor whom she'd always idolized, was repeatedly humiliated by his own mother. With time, she realizes that her father, as a young man, went off to war with his younger brother, but came back alone. His mother blames him for the loss, and there is nothing he can do to win her forgiveness. I didn't want to use a narrative voiceover, which I could have lifted from the book. Instead, I wanted to create some situations that would illuminate the girl's insights. I asked the producers if I could please talk to Miss Lawrence so that I could share my ideas with her before I begin to write. They reported back that she did not want to talk to me, that I should go ahead and do my job. This was an unsettling response. After struggling through several drafts fraught with self-doubt, I submitted a script with my innovations. Again, I asked if I could talk to the author once she had read my screenplay. I had taken considerable license and wanted to be sure I did not trouble her. I wanted to get it right. I wanted her approval. But again, she was absolutely clear. She had no desire to read the script. She didn't want to see the work in progress. She wanted to see the film once it was finished. So I had no choice. We shot the film as I wrote it. The little movie was finished with great care, and the VHS tape was sent to Ms. Lawrence immediately. There was no response. I thought perhaps she would watch it when it aired on CBC and send me a message, any message, good or bad. The reviews were complimentary, the audience substantial, and even though it was a short film, it garnered a few awards. But never did I hear from her until now. Here she is on the phone. More than a year since I sent her the package. I'm choked up and can hardly think of what to say. Well, it's good to hear from you. Yes, well, one of the producers gave me this phone number some time ago now, and I'm glad it's still yours. What time is it there? 2 something, but no problem. I'm writing, kind of, trying. My kids and husband are all sleeping. Oh, good for you. How many kids do you have? 2 boys, twins. Well, that was expedient of you, wasn't it? Her chuckle is low and friendly. Yes, I got lucky, I guess. It's after 4 a.m. your time, isn't it? Yes, but I don't sleep much. Ah, well, we have that in common. I'm a night owl too, for sure. There's a pause and I'm ready for anything. If she didn't like it, I will take it like a big girl and absorb the disappointment. Maybe I'll learn something. So I don't watch much TV, she confesses. Actually, I don't have one, and I don't have a video player either, but a friend brought one over last night and we watched the movie together. Good, good, I managed to squeak out, my throat gone dry. Well, I loved it. I thought it was so good. Oh, you did? Oh, wow. I think I'm going to cry. Yes, I couldn't imagine how you would reveal the moment, the revelation, it takes place inside the head of the girl. There's not much to see physically in a book, but you created the perfect situation, and it moved me to tears. Oh, my God. Well, I was so relieved. I veered so far away from what you wrote in order to say what I believe you were saying. Well, that's it. That's why I loved it. You understood my intention. You said it through the images and the performances. You didn't need a damn voice telling the audience what Vanessa was thinking and feeling. When she goes looking for her father and finds him alone, weeping like a child, and then she puts her arms around him like a mother, that really undid me. It said it all. I don't know what to say. I learned. The actors were terrific, weren't they? Yes, they were perfect. I felt I knew them all. I did know them all. I was so relieved. I just wanted to phone and tell you. Well, thank you so much. I sit for a moment and absorb the affirmation. How many times have I beaten myself up, thinking I hadn't upheld the integrity of her work? I hear a familiar tinkle of sound, a glass perhaps. It nudges me. Are you drinking scotch right now? I venture. Yes, in fact, I have a single malt open right here, just about to pour myself another. Well, would you mind if I run into my house and get mine? I think we should have a drink together. She laughs. That's a damn good idea. You go get it. Warmed by the scotch, we had a long and lingering talk. She explained that she had not participated in the film because she did not want to hinder me with her involvement. She didn't want me second-guessing her preferences while I was trying to find my own way to the heart of the story. She'd come to know that in order for an artist to do her best, whether she is a writer, a singer, a filmmaker, or whatever, she must feel free to explore for herself and make choices based on her own instincts and wisdom. There are a million right ways, and she wanted me to choose what was right for me. Well, thank you for giving me liberty. Oh, thank you for taking such good care of my words. So we went on to have, I'm not going to read the whole introduction, it's a bit long, but we went on, we had a wonderful talk about similarities of being prairie folk, fathers as doctors who died too young. And it was a very, very important conversation. I learned a lot. I learned a lot during that one conversation. And the introduction ends like this. A few months after her phone call, I heard that Margaret had taken her own life. She left quietly, without any fuss, only 61 years old. Having terminal lung cancer, she had decided to save her family and friends and herself the anguish of a slow, painful death. She must have been sick the night she called, but nonetheless wanted to take care of some unfinished business and pass on to me something of what she had learned. She was so honest and generous. I regret that I never got a chance to meet her in person, to thank her for the gift of that call. She gave me the courage to explore the world within and to find my own way out. So that's the introduction of Taken by the Muse. So I didn't know where to start my first book. And I'll just pause right now. I see that there's 11 little chats there, and answer any questions that might have come up. And then I have another passage I'd like to read.
Okay. Yeah, I love that opening of the book. And you do a great Margaret Lawrence voice. So Lorna would like to know, she'd really like to know how closely Bye Bye Blues follows your own mother's story.
Well, you know, when you're a little kid and you hear the stories of your parents and the older people in your family, you just have sort of touchstones, you know. I knew my parents met as kids. I knew that they were like childhood sweethearts. I know he wanted to become a doctor. All of those sorts of big points are true. I knew she came back. I knew no money came from her. I knew that she joined the small dance band. But I have to, you know, in terms of doing dialogue and really honing out the characters in the story, I really have to kind of create them out of the little bits and pieces I remember of people, or can actually imagine what must have happened between A and B for her to make such a decision that she made. You know, why would she decide that she would go in this band and travel? I mean, what were the things that went through her mind? I never really, my mom was a very shy private person, so I didn't like interview her at great length. I actually interviewed a lot of other people that lived in small towns who waited for men to come home, and using sort of the blueprint of the events I knew happened in my mom's life, I filled the rest in with things I knew had happened to other people, or that I could clearly imagine must have happened.
I'm just going to read you a couple comments. Joanne Blondheim.
Oh, yes.
Yes, says, Anne, wonderful to see you. So great to see Bye Bye Blues on the big screen last night. Very touching and special. So that last name kind of was like, oh, wait a minute.
That Blondheim just jumps out, you know.
Yes, yes, it does. And then another comment from Louise. Hi, Mom. I had the occasion to visit the very small hamlet where Bye Bye Blues was filmed. And as I walked along the street, I could hear the music and relive the film. Thank you for the memories.
Ah, Rollywood.
Yes. Okay, so something, Myrna is asking, what are your fondest memories of making Teach Me to Dance? And she says, not a trick question.
So Myrna, that must be Myrna Kostash, and she wrote the first drama I ever got to direct. And, you know, it was one of those events where here I am, I'm a director at Edmonton, and a whole crew flew out from Montreal, from the NFB headquarters. I didn't know anybody, and they thought they knew everything, and I wasn't sure what I knew and didn't know. It was kind of a new experience for me. I found out many things. It was a wonderful script, a wonderful story, but we had terrible weather making it. It was like 40 below, and all these poor people were in period clothing, you know, with leather boots in knee-high snow, and it was so difficult to shoot. The days were very short in the winter. I think it was the first time I really realized the pressure of trying to deliver something in so little time and wanting it to be good. And after making documentaries, this was such a change. And it started, you know, I started to feel out how I wanted to direct, which was perhaps not like, you know, it's often being compared to being an army, a film crew, you know, and the general's in the head and everybody follows them, and the general has a lot of power. I found that I got a lot more from my actors and my talent by being one-on-one, being nurturing. So that first film taught me a lot, and I cast a lot of people that weren't actors in that film, and I found that if they could trust you and be themselves, that they would put out a beautiful performance. That's
great. We've got actually, I'll ask my question. Was your mom alive when Bye Bye Blues was finally released?
She was. And in fact, it's one of the stories in my book is called The Screening, because it was a very nerve-wracking thing, not just to write Bye Bye Blues. When you're writing about your parents, which means your grandparents, your aunts and uncles and cousins and place, and you know you're going to have a lot of kind of people who love you, but no less they're going to find out what you have an opinion on how you did it. And so it was nerve-wracking to write it and then to cast it. And then I was so lucky to find George Blondheim, because he came over to meet my mom. I thought, well, they should meet and hear her play, because I wanted to have that kind of wartime music energy. And he just sat right down beside her and watched her for about 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden they were playing four-handed piano, and it just took off, and she just loved him. So I was very lucky to have him as by my side for the whole way through the movie. So that confidence, because I really feel like the music of that film is really the heart and soul of it. Really, it's what gets her through the war. It's what got me through the film. and that was the great joy, was the energy that music puts out, and you can see the role that it played during the war years, and it can still play during hard times.
Yeah. Eleanor Florence, hello. We're going to be seeing Eleanor a little bit later as part of Starfest. My mother June played the piano in World War II. For all the air trainees her family entertained in their home in Battleford, Saskatchewan during the war. She and I watched Bye Bye Blues several times together and loved every minute. Thank you for bringing us so much joy.
That's great. The thing is, we don't have enough films that are specifically about us. That we can say, I've been there, I've done that, I know that person, right? This is something we still have to fight for, is to be able to tell those stories.
I've got one here that's more about writing. Where to start a book seems to stop many writers. What is your advice on starting?
Well, I have a bit of a gift of the gab, I guess, because I start by telling the story. I think that for me, that really, if I tell people a story and I can see immediately they're sort of interested, and where they're not interested, and so I do what's called story slams. I have a home in a little town in Mexico, and we have story slams every couple of weeks. We all come together, and you have to tell a story in 5 minutes, and it can't be a second over the 5 minutes. And when you have to tell a story in 5 minutes, you've got to grab people right at the beginning. You've got to engage them, and then you have to bring it to a close. That starts to just teach you to kind of sculpture your story and what it is that you think you're trying to say through that story. So that's where I start. I start by telling the story.
Did you know you were going to start with this scene about your phone call with Margaret Lawrence?
No, that actually was going to be in another group of stories, but I thought, I'm saying taken by the muse, and really they're all kind of mentors of sorts that come into my life in these stories. And I thought just kind of landed on that night thinking that was like the biggest kind of serendipitous phone call, for her to phone my office at 3 a.m. Why would she think I would be there? It was just such an unlikely connection that I thought, I don't know. I just thought people would get engaged with it.
Yeah.
It's my attempt to hook people at the beginning, right?
It's a great beginning. Another Bye Bye Blues question. Great. Barb is asking, did you have any trouble casting for the characters in Bye Bye Blues? Did you think of Rebecca Jenkins right from the start, for example?
Well, I had put Rebecca Jenkins into Cowboys Don't Cry, which I made just before Bye Bye Blues. So I had been thinking of her because she was primarily, when I first met her, a singer. And she had that same joy of making music as my mother did. And so I did cast her in that movie just to get to know her. But I also, when I started to do Bye Bye Blues, in those days, we actually went right across the country. I went to every Montreal, Toronto, Winnipeg. And I probably saw a couple thousand people for that film when you come to all of the kids and everything. And Rebecca just keeps, stuck in my mind. She didn't play the piano, but she could learn how to move her hands in the right direction. And there was wonderful young actors that tried out for that part. And I'm sure that they got quite annoyed. I brought some of them back 4 and 5 times. And tried different things with them, but Rebecca just never left the front place. Nobody edged her out. In terms of the other parts, I mean, Kate Reed, who was really an icon, didn't live that long after we actually did that film. A lot of those actors, I don't know, they're really special actors who had started in the theater and just had huge souls. And like they're from right across the continent. So we took a long time to cast. We don't do that anymore, unfortunately. That's another thing that's changed. It's sort of now done, virtually like this. So we don't get to do that.
Do you want to keep talking about Taken by the Muse? Do you want to talk about how you decided what went into the book?
I didn't, people say I was going to do a memoir, and I thought, no, I'm really a storyteller. I want them to be little stories the stories that can stand on their own, that they don't need another story to set them up. And so I just really went back and I thought, the times that I crossed paths with people and places and situations that really sort of changed what I was going to do with my life was mostly all in the 60s. And 70s, and I had a number of stories that I had told in that era, and so the first one is I did a lot of traveling. I spent about 3 years of my life in my 20s traveling, and not actually a particularly good traveler if people were to judge like my pictures or my diaries or whatever. I sort of was a wanderer. And I ended up going down Africa, down the overland through Africa, mostly on my own. And so I got myself into a number of situations and ended up, my car broke down one night and I ended up spending a night in a village. So I thought that was a very interesting environment for a story. And I wrote what happened to me that night into one story. And then after that, I was soon to go home and I bumped into some old friends and they were trying to make a film and they wanted someone who would be on camera to ask questions. And they asked me, and suddenly I was with this group of guys doing this crazy thing. And I'd been a high school teacher, I'd been a computer programmer, I'd been a singer and an actor. And I just went, well, this is amazing. This kind of takes a lot of different talents and puts them all into one job. So the second story is really about me trying to, nose my way into this group of guys and see if I could be a partner or a member and learn how to do, the craft of making films. And then, of course, when I started to get the stories that I wanted to tell, I started to branch out a little bit. And then the next film I did was, the company had to stay alive and we had to make money. We had to buy equipment. We had to be realistic. And we took a big contract from Syncrude and to make a film about the environment around Fort McMurray. And we learned a lot about the world making that film. It was a hard film to make. It was an interesting film. We did, our very best by it. But, it wasn't a film that came from our experience or, it was sort of like someone coming to us and offering us something. It's very different than you finding a story and wanting to tell it. So there was a lesson to be told there. And then the next story is really about, I was going to make a film about, the suffragettes, the person's case, the women that we know sort of on the prairie as our history makers. And a lady who had lived a very difficult life as a homesteader phoned me out of the blue and insisted I come and visited her. And she told me her story, and that really turned my thinking around that, there was a whole lot of people out there that telling people stories or keeping the history of the victors, the people who succeed in life, the people who become politicians or stars or well known, but very few people tell the stories of the people whose lives pass without much notice.
Mhm.
And so it kind of changed the kinds of stories I wanted to tell. And then I write a story about going to India, and that's quite a major diversion. And you know, being a traveler, I mean, India is the ultimate destination, and I ended up going to the Rajneesh ashram and spending you know, 4 months there. And I didn't stay, you know, like some of my friends stayed 7 and 8 years, but I broke away. But I learned a lot there, and I learned a lot that I've used all my life. I don't regret having that encounter at all. I thought it really gave me some tools for when I work. And then the last story, well, I'd like to read the end of the last story for you. The last story really is about a woman that the film board wanted to make more films out west because they hadn't made very many out here, and they sent me sort of on a search. And they wanted me to find, you know, subjects for some documentary films. And everybody kept telling me about this old woman who lived in the forest. And they directed me to where she lived. And she was in her late 80s. And there was no path. There were no footprints into this place. And so I followed directions, and I ended up coming to her hut. And when I got there, I actually thought, oh my God, there's something, you know, maybe she's not alive. There's no footprints around this cabin. You know, I knocked on the door going, hello, hello. And I heard nothing. And then I heard some scratching, and then somebody trying to open the door because it was, you know, stuck with the snow. And she stuck her face out and said, "You come for coffee?" And so I went in and I stayed with her for a couple of days and listened to her stories. And when I went back to the city, I wrote that up as the one that I wanted to make right away because, well, she wasn't going to be around much longer. And she was the real McCoy. She was the real McCoy. She was unlike anyone else I'd ever met. She was so in the moment and so kind of just blissful. She didn't carry around guilt or anger or whatever. She was very clear, and I just had a wonderful, wonderful time with her.
And you can actually, anybody can watch that film, that short film you made. I watched it. It's on the National Film Board site. So,
yes. A number of my early films are all on that site, most of the early documentaries. And I made one documentary about 10 years ago or 8 years ago in India. It's also there, called Chi.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah, it's something I made not too long ago, and because I hadn't worked for the film board for a very long time, but that was quite an experience too.
Are there stories that were originally in the book that you have ended up pulling out?
There are, and they'll be in another book probably. Yeah, I want to do a book that's just stories that people have given me. And the book I'm writing right now is really sort of held together, glued together with music, with different experiences and how it's affected my life and other people's lives. And I also want to do a book, probably it'll be a novel about the making of A War Story, which was about my father, and I ended up going to the Far East and back to the camp where he was taken and kept as a prisoner of war for 3.5 years.
Should I pop off? Do you want to do a little bit more of a reading, or what would you...
I don't know. Is there any more of those? There's 17 chats. Is there some?
Let me see. I think we've got
any questions there?
Yeah, Jeff's just putting a link to your films on the National Film Board site. Here we go. Here's one. Barb Johnstone. I really wish that Anne had been approached by whoever is making Louise Penny's Gamache novels into a TV series to write the screenplays and direct. I think she would do a fantastic job, as well as keeping them true to their Canadian roots. I really worry they will be turned into a generic TV series like some other Canadian novels that have been turned into TV programs and movies?
Yes, like I have, I tell you secrets, but I have worked with the Americans a lot because that's what Vancouver is. Vancouver, it's not as passionate about its own history as, say, Edmonton is. I find it a lot more kind of, self-awareness in Edmonton. But like I was doing a series, I shall not say what name, but it was a period piece, and it was supposed to be 1920 or so. It was very hard actually to tell what year it was because they were so inaccurate. And they pulled a Wells Fargo sign, and they're going to put it on one side of the street. It was going to be the dominant thing on one. And I said, I'm sorry, but Wells Fargo wasn't in Canada. And the American producer said, "Oh, well, it could have been." And I said, "No, it couldn't be. Like, it wasn't here." And they, well, but we could say it could have been. No, we can't say we could have been. So I refused to shoot that whole side of the scene for the street for the whole episode, and it got to be quite a thing. Like, why aren't you ever shooting over there, right? And I said, "Well, I'm just not. I'm not shooting that sign." I don't know if they ever took it down, but it was like that about everything. It was sort of like we have a lot of Canadian content that's being controlled by people who don't really know what that is. They just think of us as a great North state of some kind, and it's very frustrating as a storyteller to be on set and try to hold some kind of line and say, we are different. We do have our own history.
You and I talked a little bit on Sunday when we were working on the introduction to Bye Bye Blues, and we were talking about your mission, if that's the right word, to get Canadian films preserved.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit? I'm sure there's
that's a huge, huge problem because we shot, people in my generation, we shot everything on 35 or 16 millimeter film, and everything went to digital so quickly that there are a lot of films that are really disintegrating and haven't been digitized. And in the meantime, all of the labs have closed pretty much. I think there's 2 in North America that are open. And there are wonderful films that are, they do deteriorate and because they're nitrate, and if they're not turned into digital, they just won't last. So I have personally paid for Bye Bye Blues to be put onto a 4K digital, and Angel Square I got onto a 4K digital. But I'm fighting to get Loyalties and The War Between Us and other films that I've made, and I'm encouraging other filmmakers to make an effort to go to their governments, their whatever they can do. Now there is hope in that the Alberta Archives seems to have a special interest in films, and I think they're going to end up probably with the best collection on the prairies. And so I have actually I transferred all of my archives over to them, and other filmmakers have too. And I'm hoping that they'll follow through on it, buy the equipment and have the equipment to be transferred. But it's really a shame that that there are in the National Archives in Ottawa, there are films that are just still in 35. Like right now, there is 2 copies of Loyalties that exist. Mm-hmm. And there's only 2 35 millimeter copies of Bye Bye Blues that aren't all scratched up and everything. So I was really glad to be able to get one that was in pristine, condition and get it turned into a digital. But it's, it'll, I don't know, there'll be things that are lost, but I'm hoping that, the different film festivals that use those films to open their festivals, I'm pressuring everybody to not let these things get lost.
I'm going to go back to other people's questions because I keep asking you my own questions. I think this question is from Jeff. Edmontonians indeed have a certain very Edmonton kind of self-awareness for sure. For you, what themes would you explore if you were making a film set in Edmonton?
Gosh, I don't know. I did 40 films in Edmonton. I mean, I love the history. I love the thought that, you know, I think there's a lot of stories that haven't been told. Of course, nowadays I probably wouldn't be able to do Augusta because I'm not First Nations. But I just find that the lives that were lived. For instance, I met some nuns when I was doing great grandmother in 1975 that had lived startling lives, had pushed ox cart up to northern Saskatchewan and had been received by the people up there and ended up spending a good deal of their life up there and then moving to several other places across the country. It was an amazing relationship, and they'd ended up in this old in a extended care hospital together telling me this story. I don't know, you just have to dig and you'll find such surprises. And and I think, I mean, I haven't lived there now I can't believe it, but I haven't lived there now for 32 years. So that's quite a long time. I'm obviously out of touch. But it's such people from everywhere are coming to this one place that's, on this bald face of wilderness. There has to be a lot of stories to be told.
Absolutely. Another one, Myrna, have you ever been attracted to a story from or about Quebec? I'm thinking of the current Quebecois film version of Marie Chapdelaine. It has your name all over it as a director in English.
Well, I don't, the thing is, like, I have about 5 beautiful scripts. Like, I have 2 that were written by Sharon Reese that never got made. I honestly can't tell you how hard it is to get a feature film made. It's nearly always television now, and as much, I mean, I hate to talk about the old days, but in the old days, you had one producer, you had one writer, you had one director, and then everybody had one of everything else, right? But now you have 25 producers, and they all have their own agenda, and it's a very, very different thing. And then there's all of the politics. Like, if it's from Quebec, they're going to want to have, someone from Quebec writing or directing it. There's a lot of politics involved, and I don't know. It's and I'm English. I would love to do more Canadian work, and with an E was a great pleasure. I mean, it went away from the book, but it was such an all Canadian crew with an all Canadian agenda. And we all felt like this might be the last chance we have to do something like this, really to see beyond the books what was happening in that part of the world beyond Anne's life. But it's just getting rarer and rarer. I'm in my mid 70s now. I still have a lot of work offered to me, of course, but I'm just a little tired of doing films and television that seem to be formula, and don't respect the uniqueness of stories. They all seem to have to fit into this formula that they want, with all the commercial breaks. And we don't have access to our own theaters, and you can't make your money back on a little film if the theaters aren't going to put them on. And a theater owner is going to put a film in their theater that's going to make money, and that's going to be the big Marvel comics and the big effects that cost $300 million, which is more than we spend in all of Canada for all the films that are made here. So I hate to be pessimistic, but they'll probably have a British director because it might be a co-production, and all the politics come into play.
This is actually, someone had asked me about this too, and I was going to ask you. The question is Bye Bye Blues on DVD at all? And you and I talked about that, and no, it is not. So Barb's saying everywhere I searched online, I can't find a physical copy.
So if anybody's looking for a DVD of Bye Bye Blues, they have to write to me. I will help them.
So
but I can't.
Oh, so you go.
No, I'm just saying I can. The whole thing about Canadian distribution is that somehow we didn't take care of royalties and payouts, and contracts have run out. And but I have found a way that if you get a hold of me through my website, I can probably help you get a DVD. Unfortunately, people, there are not very many people want DVDs anymore because they don't have DVD players. So what we're going to, it does stream on, I think it's YouTube, like YouTube, but it's a very poor quality. So I have a better quality because I spent $20,000 having a digital copy made of Bye Bye Blues. I didn't know what else to do. With only 2 prints left, I felt I just had to make this investment, and so I had it digitized myself. But I have to be a little sneaky about it, okay?
Let me see here. What's Jeff got? Our book club was able to discuss your book just this past Tuesday. It's good timing. And I wanted to share that we were unanimous in our enjoyment in reading your book. What adventures you have had. You're an inspiration. And actually, someone I work with said that it made her feel like she was a bit of a slacker. So that's from Kathy, or from Kathy. So when it comes to where do we go as, just the general public to push to get Canadian films preserved, or to get for Canadian films to get re-released on DVD or Blu-ray, or,
Well, I mean, I think we start with, we used to be able to, we used to have CBC have a whole lot more programming. Well, I couldn't have done Bye Bye Blues or Loyalties or Cowboys Don't Cry or Angel Square if CBC hadn't invested in it. Mm-hmm. And it used to be that the Film Board and CBC and Telefilm, everybody would put their money in the pot, and we would need a distributor, and the package would be there. But they have lessened the amount of money they have and divided it into so many pieces that you have to have 40 financiers. You have to get 40 little bits of money. So, I mean, I think it's really, we need to lean on our broadcasters. And I don't know if we'll ever be able to do it, but like with music, they put a quota on how much Canadian music had to be on radio.
Right.
And that really did work. And I remember Flora McDonald. I don't know who else might remember her, but of course she was a politician. She felt very strongly that we should have a quota of what films are in our theaters. And not because the market wasn't the only thing that was important about it. It was like, this was our culture, where these are our stories. If nobody made a picture on the side of the cave, there would have been no indication of that those people had been there, right? These are our cave dwelling drawings that we need to make and keep. And she literally, her career was greatly damaged by her insistence that we do this. She was very, very stubborn about it. And she didn't want much. She wanted something between 5 and 10% of the films on our screens. But we're getting to the point now where people don't go to theaters, of course, as much as they did even before COVID. So we need to, make sure that we stand strong with having Canadian programming, and buy Canadian books and more plays. Plays are where we have a lot of control. Like, there's a couple of stories in my book that would make fabulous plays, and I'm hoping that will happen.
Well, that would be good. Then we can do make a little combo with a future Starfest.
Yeah.
You know, bring and play to Starfest. Do you want to read a little bit about Augusta?
Yeah, I want to read.
We'll
I started you at the very beginning of the book, and I'm going to go right to the very end. So I found this wonderful woman, Augusta, and I only had 4 days to shoot the film on her. I had 3 people with me, so it was a very, very small little movie. I just wanted to do a portrait film of her, and so we went up there, the 4 of us, and we just followed her around for 4 days. I didn't direct her to do anything. I just went with her on her life. She wanted to go some places because we had a car, and she didn't often have access to transportation. And then I went and I edited it myself, and then we finished it, and yeah, this is about what happened after I finished the film. It's autumn when the little movie is completely finished and ready for a showing. I take the first answer print from the laboratory in Vancouver and drive north to Williams Lake to show Augusta what we've done together. I pick her up in my rental van and we head over to Edna's on the reserve where there is electricity. While they have coffee in the kitchen and chatter away in shoo-swap about I don't know what, I tack up a white sheet on Edna's living room wall and set up a 16mm projector. I pull the drapes closed and turn off the lights. All right, you two, I call to them. It's time to come on in here and sit down. Now, they did not see what I was doing while they were talking, cherishing their time together. As they come into the darkness and see the projector, they're bewildered. Saying nothing, Augustus takes a chair, places it in front of the projector, and sits down staring into the lens. I realize that she thinks the projector is another camera, and we're going to shoot again. She's ready to tell me all her story once more. Augusta, turn the chair around. It's going to be up there. She looks around, surprised. Edna, what is that sheet doing on your wall? Edna is perplexed as Augusta. They both think I'm daft. Both of you, turn your chairs around, get comfortable, look at the sheet on the wall. I have a surprise for you. Amused, they reposition themselves as I flip the switch on the projector and the reels start to turn. It is the best screening of my life. The first shot comes up of Augusta sweeping her raw wooden floor. It starts on her feet and tilts up, and as we hear the transistor radio giving the local weather and messages. That's me, Edna. That's me on your sheet. And that's you talking on the radio. She's not afraid or proud. She's just bedazzled, as though she's watching some kind of wizardry. There's a message from Edna to Augusta to catch the early bus to town. And now Augusta is flabbergasted, thinking that Edna is on the radio show instead of right here beside her. I realize that she has never seen a film before. And I had no idea what we were doing when we were there shooting. To her, we were just a group of young people interested in her stories, and she was happy to share what she knew to be true with us. Completely in the moment, she talks to her other self on the sheet, cheering herself onward. We cut to the church, and there she is sitting in a pew, wearing her best scarf. The organ begins. All right, Augusta, she says, you sing and shoo-swap. No one will stop you. She sings the hymn in the living room with herself on the screen, loud and strong. But I've edited out a couple of verses, and that trips her up momentarily. Augusta, she says to herself, you've missed 2 verses. Go back. You know all the words. Sitting there in Edna's living room, she watches herself visit the graveyard and weeps. She sees the headstone on the ground and she mutters, who keeps pushing that over? I thought I fixed that. Here it is, down again. Beneath some scenes, there's a distant sound of harmonica, and she croons to it. The film ends with her walking down an ancient path along the river with credits rolling. Amongst the crawl of names, it is noted that the composer is Augusta Evans. She doesn't take notice of that at all. She's still in a trance. When the film runs out, she turns to me wide-eyed. That was like a dream, like a dream. Where did it go? It was wonderful, agrees Edna. The smokehouse was beautiful. For a while, they don't say another word, holding themselves in, mulling over what they've just seen. I rewind the film, and then I ask, would you like to see it again? Again? We can see it again? They were in disbelief. It's not gone? We watch it a couple of times, and then Augusta realizes that all we need to make this happen is electricity. We pack it all up, and she has me drive all over the countryside to show that movie to her family, her friends, and her priest, always introducing it the same way. I have got something to show you. We have put all my stories in this tin can, and we can take them out and put them on your wall. You will see. I give her a check for the music. The harmonica playing I've used throughout the film is the score. She doesn't understand it all, but signs the contract, grateful to have more money than she's ever seen in her life. We go to the bank to cash it, and everyone there stays after work to watch the film. What am I going to do with all this money? She asked me. Well, you could get running water. I'm not moving to my cabin next week for the winter. I want someone, I am moving to my cabin next week for the winter. I don't want one out there making a mess, digging it all up. Well, what would you like? I ask. I'd like a new gravestone for my boy. Could we get that? She asks. Of course, whatever you want. She holds my hand, and I will never forget the strength in her grip as she looks at me with tears in her eyes. Her face is a maze of lines mapping out what it is to be human. When she laughs, her eyes well up and tears flow freely. She sparkles with love and wisdom, living out her life in a quiet, truthful way. I don't know I've ever met a more enlightened soul. She is mindlessly compassionate, has no ego, is always in the now, completely truthful and spontaneous. She is a true teacher by example, a guru gone unnoticed, but that matters not at all to her. This is a good thing we've done, Anne. These stories will live forever now, dancing on the walls, won't they? Yes, I assure her, forever. Then I have done what I was supposed to do. I nod. I understand her sense of accomplishment. Yes, I've done what I was supposed to do, she repeats. And you, my friend, you've just begun. What do you mean, I ask? Well, it's time to tell your own stories. What you know. Well, I don't know where to begin. Well, start with yourself and tell those stories that no one else can tell. That's how the little book ends.
You made me cry my eyes out, actually, finishing the book. I was crying so hard because it was just such a lovely ending. And just to remind everybody, you can watch this little film. You can see Augusta. She is living forever, and her stories are living forever. So thank you so much. It's been about an hour. Do we have any final questions? I have a feeling we could really talk all night, but
could I see those chats and just answer them quickly, or?
I think, let me just see. Does anyone have anything? Okay, I've got here. I don't know. Can you see the chat, Anne?
Well, I can see them one at a time. I haven't, let me just, I'm not a master of the, oh, look at this here.
Yeah, so
okay,
Jeff's been keeping track. So we have a new one here, Barb Johnstone. Thanks for both of you.
To make it a delightful event, I agree with what Anne has said about Canadian stories, films, movies. Perhaps, Anne, you can approach one of your many talented local Edmonton playwrights and see if they would adapt some of your stories into the plays. Seeing Bye Bye Blues again yesterday was great, and the talented musicians afterwards made it even more special. I just, so sorry I missed that you had musicians there and everything. I mean, really, I looked forward for 6 months. Well, I don't know when you got a hold of me, but boy, I had that circled on my calendar forever. And well, I just hope I can come to Edmonton another time and maybe with my next book, maybe with this one. But it's
yes.
it's a great joy to read. from the book. I have fun. It's sort of, I think you can kind of tell how I talk and how I tell stories, because it's a lot of people have found that they have read the book to each other, families and couples, and they each pick a story and they read it aloud, because it is sort of in the spoken word,
Yeah.
in its style.
I know for my mom too, she also just sort of took off in 1970 and hopped on an ocean liner and went to Australia for a couple of years. So she said when she was reading it, there was a lot of it she could identify with, just this sort of going out to find yourself.
Yeah, and we didn't know much about the world, and I think we'd had such a blessed, I think our generation has had the most blessed time on this planet, in the most blessed country. Really, we've had very little to worry about. I know I went out to see the world thinking everybody was good. I had very few, what I would call experiences that really scared me. There were a few that I had to kind of think fast, what am I going to do? But usually, a human response worked. I went from Syria to South Africa alone. So overland, boats, camels, carts, trains, trucks, whatever was going in the right direction. And there were so many kindnesses. And we didn't have internet. We didn't know what was happening off the beaten track. And I don't know if I had kids. I don't know if I was, encourage them to do the trips I did. I just feel like I was very lucky to live when I did, and something could have happened to me. And I know some things did happen to travelers in those days, but it just felt that there were a lot of untouched places yet that hadn't really. They were a place unto themselves. The big world hadn't influenced them. And there was no even radios in a lot of places. So really, if you weren't in any way, dangerous to them, they were curious about you. And most of them had, that feeling that strangers were to be welcomed. And I had a lot of wonderful, wonderful encounters with people all over the world.
If I'm telling everyone, if you haven't had a chance to read the book, you can definitely pick it up at our local bookstores or take a look at Anne's website. And we do finally have a couple copies on the shelf. For a long time, they were all checked out. So you can still check out Anne's book from the library. So I'm going to share all this chat with you as well. I'll send it to you so you have it. But I've got one final, I think we'll end with one final thing from Joanne. What an eye-opener, the politics of filmmaking in Canada, etc. We need to work harder to bring our stories to our communities. Where do we start?
Well, I guess, as I say, I think like story slams, I think we have to go back to live entertainment, musicians, plays, readings, poetry readings, because the airwaves really are big business. Mm-hmm. They're big business. And so I think that all these, local talent, visiting talent, it brings the community together and gives you a sense of place. And I think that was just a given when I was growing up, that we went to the dances and listened to the Saratogas and West Acus and all the local bright and wonderful musicians, and it feels like that's been overpowered by the global entertainment business, and I hope people start doing two-handed plays and three-handed plays and things that we can also manage in this COVID situation, and let the arts do what they were meant to do, which is to keep us together and keep us connected.
Well, thank you. You pulled us together during this COVID time. I'm going to say good night to you, Anne, but I'm also going to say, can you hurry up with your next book so that next Starfest or the one after that, we can actually bring you here.
I'd love to.
So thank you, thank you. I'm going to say a few other thank yous. A shout out to Jeff, who's sitting over here and keeping on top of all the comments and keeping me all organized. I also, we do get a lot of sponsorship to put on this festival. So I wanted to thank our funders. Our main funder is the City of St. Albert. And then we're also funded by the Friends of the St. Albert Public Library, the Alberta Foundation for the Arts, Canada Council for the Arts, and a thank you to our media sponsors, the St. Albert Gazette, T8N Magazine, and Edify Magazine. And I want to say a special thanks to the Art and Theatre and to Caitlin North at the Art. And it's nice to come up with interesting ideas for partnerships. And in February, after I got a yes from Anne, I pretty much contacted Caitlin right away and said, hey, I'm getting Anne Wheeler. Should we show a movie? And we were able to do it. So that was also fantastic. So thank you to everyone. At the very end of the festival, you will all get a survey. And there will be a chance if you fill it in to win a full set of the Starfest books. We do really value your thoughts, and we do want to know who you want to see at Starfest. This is how we got Anne Wheeler, because many of you said, please bring Anne Wheeler. So our next event tomorrow night is Chebby Stevens, and she will be interviewed by Jana Pruden. So that's an evening of kind of an evening of a thriller, and you can still get tickets for that at starfest.ca. We've got a lot of really great authors coming up, and this has been a lovely way to start. So thank you. I hate to say good night, but I will say good night. Good night, Anne. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.